Well, hello, my dear friends. Justyn Smith here. I want to thank you for clicking play again today. It's a blessing to have you back on the channel with us. Today we are in Psalm 88 with this topic, I am distracted. Now here's the verse I want to mention where we pull the title from. In Psalm 88:15, I am afflicted and ready to die from my youth up. While I suffer thy terrors, I am distracted. And we're going to say more about that verse to come, but isn't it interesting that that phrase, I am distracted, is used within the sentence, while I suffer thy terrors? And you must point out the fact that this guy, he understood a little bit about the allowance of God's way in his life that wasn't the way of blessing, but maybe the way of judgment or the way of the terrors of this life or the other enemies. And you could go to different Psalms and recognize different things that can describe the word terrors. But the word distraction is what I'm focused on today because that's what the psalmist was feeling. Therefore, I give you point number one, a description of man's suffering. A description of man's suffering. As we saw in that title verse, as we talk about being distracted, there's obviously affliction, obviously suffering going on. But it doesn't just begin in verse 15, it goes all the way back to verse 1 of this psalm. So letter A, he had a personal God. And this is something that we need to anchor to in the midst of our sufferings. So in the midst of our sufferings, we know we have a personal God. O Lord, God of my salvation, I have cried day and night before thee. And maybe you're crying day and night before God. And that leads you to point B. He seemed to be in full-time prayer, where it says in verse 1 and 2, O Lord God of my salvation, I have cried day and night before thee. Let my prayer come before thee. Incline thine ear unto my cry. And maybe you find yourself in this particular situation where you too recognize that you have a personal God that you can pray to. And you've had times in your life, and maybe even right now, where all you are doing is crying out to God because, letter C, you have a heavy soul, just like he, the psalmist, has a heavy soul within this passage. In verse 3, for my soul is full of troubles, and my life draweth nigh unto the grave. I mean, he literally felt like he was in the place of death from his youth up. He literally felt the afflictions of life were outweighing the good times, and he was ready to give up. He felt, letter D, very weak. It says in verse number 4, I am counted with them that go down into the pit. I am as a man that hath no strength. And right now, in your situation of life, where you find yourself weighed down with affliction and suffering, you are weak. It's very obvious. But not only are you weak, letter E, you can feel forgotten just like this psalmist. Verse 5, free among the dead, like the slain that lie in the grave, whom thou rememberest no more, and they are cut off from thy hand. Cut off from thy hand. I mean, I feel like I'm in the place where I'm forgotten. I feel like I'm in the place where I am weak. I feel like I'm in the place that's very, very low, as it says in verse 6, thou hast laid me in the lowest pit, in the darkness, in the deeps. And I need to bring back the face here again and say, wait a second, guys. This is a real feeling that is bringing you to the point of being distracted from what God is doing in your life. God is at work. And God is wanting to bring you to a place where his name is exalted through the testimony of your life. But you might go through a lot of praying, a lot of heaviness, a lot of weakness, a lot of the feeling of abandonment and being forgotten, being very low in this life and feeling that type of burden. And then even letter G, he felt overwhelmed by God's affliction. Verse 7, thy wrath lieth hard upon me. Thou hast afflicted me with all thy waves, Selah. And I'm not here to try to describe all the waves of affliction, but you can understand with that terminology of a wave, as we're presently recording in Florida and having gone to the beach, you see those waves that they just keep coming, right? They just keep coming. And what a picture when you read this, a word picture of afflictions. Now, some don't understand this fully, and others understand it way more than some, that the afflictions just keep coming. The waves just keep coming. They just keep pounding you. They won't let up. They won't let you go. And that's how this psalmist felt, which would lead to his distraction. In letter H, his friends had forsaken him. Maybe you feel like this in this particular situation of life where you feel like you don't know which way to turn because there's no one to turn to except for God. Thou hast put away mine acquaintance far from me. Thou hast made me an abomination unto them. And I said that like a question mark, but I want you to think about it, okay? Because this psalmist is feeling that. I mean, I'm an abomination to them. They stay away from me. They think that if they get close to me, that maybe they are going to face these particular situations of affliction as well. And I don't know about you. I don't know if you've ever been in that specific location or time in this life where the waves of affliction are just pounding you and people don't want to be around you because, I mean, it seems like everywhere you go, you bring affliction with you. And that's how this psalmist felt. His friends, his familiar friends, his family, they weren't around him. Maybe you feel very, very lonely and forgotten at this time, very low and very weak because of what's going on. But you're praying to God. You're looking to God. And that's the point of what this passage is showing us today, that there's a man going through difficulties, but he still looks to God. Okay? Number two, his mourning is understood within and without. Here's what I mean. Verse 9, mine eye mourneth by reason of affliction. Lord, I have called daily upon thee. I have stretched out my hands unto thee. So there's this understanding of within, the understanding of without as he's stretching out his hands to God. Within, I'm going to you. Without, I'm going to you. I'm lifting my hands to you. My mourning, my agony is understood within me. My agony is seen without me. I mean, all people got to do is look on me. All people got to do is listen to me. There's something within that is overwhelming me. That leads us to point 3, a man's prayer for deliverance. And I have several things to mention. He brought questions to God in his prayer, okay? Notice these 3 verses. Wilt thou show wonders to the dead? Shall dead arise and praise thee, Selah? Shall thy loving kindness be declared in the grave, or thy faithfulness in destruction? Shall thy wonders be known in the dark, and thy righteousness in the land of forgetfulness? And these questions are being brought to God because he feels like he is so low. And if I die, God, is there going to be anyone to bring you this praise? Am I going to be able to do that if I am in that position? And really, no, not on the human earthly level, okay? Now, other things are going to take place in what would be after death for him. But yet what he's trying to say is, listen, while I breathe and while I live, I have wonderful opportunity to praise you, but am I going to be able to declare you from the grave? Am I going to be able to make your name known, how wonderful it is if my life passes from this life? As he's bringing these questions, he continued to lift prayers to God in verse 13 and 14. But unto thee have I cried. O Lord, in the morning shall my prayer prevent thee. Lord, why castest thou off my soul? Why hidest thou thy face from me? I know. If your prayer life is not very deep, you don't understand prayers like this, because normally you pray things that are kind of surface level prayers. They're good. It's showing your thankfulness. If you're mindful to be thankful for the food or thankful for the good day, but in your walk with God and your relationship with Him, you'll find yourself in seasons of life that aren't exactly good. You're bringing questions before God, and you're even asking God, why hast thou cast off my soul? Why hidest thou thy face from me? Again, noting he understood the difference between the face of God shining upon him and the face of God being turned away from him, which is most like Christ when he was on the cross. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Letter C, he had a long season of grief. And maybe you have a long season of grief today. Listen to verse 15 again, as it was our text title verse. I am afflicted and ready to die from my youth up. Long season of grief. While I suffer thy terrors, I am distracted. Then it says in our D.2.3, he was distracted due to all the terrors of God. And we saw that at the end of verse 15. While I suffer thy terrors, I am distracted. And again, I'm not trying to bring out exactly what that means, but yet we do see in the scriptures that there is an allowance of God. Afflictions do come by the design of God sometimes. The waves of God are going to pound, and it's not exactly going to be easy. But the point is, the psalmist is turning to God again. He felt claustrophobic because of these terrors, and maybe you can understand a little bit about that in verse 16 and 18. Thy fierce wrath goeth over me. Thy terrors have cut me off. They came round about me daily like water. They compassed me about together. Now, I point this out and bring it to this realization that sometimes people who feel the terrors from God and that they've been cut off, they won't want anything to do with God. And that's a big question mark, right? This psalmist, it's not that he doesn't want anything to do to God. He's going to God. Even though these terrors he feels are cutting him off, even though he feels overwhelmed and the waves are pounding him, he's not turning away from God. He's turning to God in the midst of the terrors that he is facing. He still recognizes God's authority. He's not going to give the enemy any credit here. He recognizes the allowance of God in his life. He knows his position. He's distracted, he's afflicted, but yet he turns to God. In letter F, he was better acquainted with darkness than close friends. A lover and friend hast thou put far from me, and mine acquaintance into darkness. This is the reality. All of those have been pushed away from me. It's like they're in darkness, and I'm acquainted with darkness. It's like I don't see them, but all I see is the darkness. They have been put far away from me. I can't see clearly anybody who is close to me as they should be in this life. But again, the psalmist isn't turning away from God. He's turning to God. So maybe you're distracted today. Maybe you're overwhelmed with the wave of affliction that keeps knocking you down. Maybe there's terrors from God that is just bringing you to a point of saying, what is going on? Keep seeking God. For you will find out that at the end of it all, God is always only good, and He is there. He's present with you, and He is the place where you can dwell. You can find shelter. You can find safety, even with everything going on. And there are some Psalms of study coming up where we are going to see that, and we are going to be encouraged that even when we're distracted, we can turn to God. Even when we're overwhelmed, we can go to Him. Even when we don't know what to do in the terrors of darkness, we can rest in God. He is worthy to turn to, and we need to. We shouldn't turn away from Him because I'm just blaming Him. I mean, look at what He is doing. I'm never going to draw nigh to Him again. No. When you draw nigh to God, you find yourself in the best position possible. And therefore, eventually you will realize this season was to give praise to God. And even this season will be beautiful one day. My dear friend, thank you for listening. Thank you for clicking play. Thank you for hanging out with us for a little while as we have watched how God has taken a man through difficult days, but this man continues to stick to God, praying to God, trying to find hope and light through his God as he brings complaints to Him. Cast your care upon Him. You know He does care for you, and see and know and feel that care that He wants to bring into your life. Again, thank you for clicking play. Have a blessed day.